Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening as we talk about taking bold action to protect our ocean. And our conversation tonight is going to be about the movement to protect 30% of our ocean by 2030. You can also watch this live on Facebook. So welcome to those of you who are joining us here on Zoom, and welcome to all of you out there on Facebook. Krista, you can start recording now. We're going to start. We have a really fabulous panel for you tonight, even though it doesn't like it. We have with us tonight Amy Kenney, who is the Executive Director of the National Ocean Protection Coalition, as well as Marcella Graudiņš, who is the founder and director of Azul, and I will be giving them more formal introductions before they speak with us tonight. We also have Assemblymember, California State Assemblymember Kalra, who is representing District 27. He is still on the Assembly floor, where they're taking an important vote, but he will be joining us shortly. Elizabeth Murdoch with us from the NRDC, who is having some technical difficulties in joining the Zoom call, but we are going to flow and we are going to work our way through this. And so we're going to start tonight with some short presentations. And Amy Kenney will be giving us our first presentation. And Amy serves as the Executive Director of the National Ocean Protection Coalition, which is a group of organizations working together to support place-based protection in the ocean. The coalition has demonstrated the power of collaboration across the ocean community. Amy has spent more than 20 years working at the interface of science, policy, advocacy, communications around in the most challenging ocean conservation issues. So bear with me just a minute until I bring up your presentation.
Great, and while you're pulling it up, I think I can go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for having—
Hold on just a minute, because there is another important piece that I do want to touch on, given circumstances that are happening in our world today. So just give me one moment. So here we are, taking bold action for the ocean. And then I do want us all to just take a moment of silence to recognize that Black Lives Matter. I think we're all experiencing at different levels all sorts of emotions around the events that are happening this week, but none of us can be feeling it as much as our Black community. So please, let's just take a moment to recognize our brothers and sisters and everybody who's involved in trying to make our world a more just and sustainable place for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, so I apologize for the technical glitch, but it seems we have lost Catherine. She is having some issues with her internet. But I believe, Amy, you have access to that PowerPoint. Are you able to share your screen with us?
I am. Let me just pull that up. All right, can you see it okay?
Yes, looks great. Thank you.
Sure, of course. So thank you, Catherine, for that moment of silence. I appreciate it. And thanks to the Save Our Shores team for hosting this event tonight. It's such a pleasure to celebrate World Oceans Day and Week with all of you. So several years ago, I had the pleasure of working for the Pew Oceans Commission with California's own Secretary Leon Panetta, who also led in protecting California's treasured ocean places. Tonight, Catherine asked me to provide a bit of an overview of the international and national context for 30 by 30 and why this goal and target is so important. So the momentum began at the international level. The Convention on Biological Diversity had established a target of protecting 10% of the ocean by 2020. As this deadline approached, a triple global crisis emerged. A biodiversity crisis with at least 1 million species at risk of extinction. A climate crisis where we know the climate is making the oceans warmer, more acidic, and rising. And a nature crisis with the rapid expansion of industrial uses of the ocean, leaving no corner untouched by human activity. In fact, 2/3 of the ocean has been severely altered by people. So what did we do? We turned to scientists. Scientists tell us that we must protect at least 30% of the global ocean to address these crises. Marine protected areas must be a cornerstone of the global and national and local goal to save the planet and ultimately to save humanity. This is based on hundreds of studies over decades of research. We know that when we protect places, habitats recover, animals come back, and life can thrive again. This has a long tradition on land with our national parks and our wildlife refuges, and we have a lot of experience in the oceans to know the benefits. So what are those benefits? In strongly protected areas, places that limit industrial extractive activities, there are more fish, the fish are bigger, the fish produce more eggs that replenish the population, animals live longer, so the population includes both the young and the old, and the diversity of organisms is higher. These benefits spill over into adjacent areas. And that's a lot of the reason why the global community is encouraging nations to adopt the goal of protecting at least 30% of the ocean by 2030 under the UN Convention of Biological Diversity. They are currently negotiating a new framework for the next decade. And this ambition requires the collective will and action of all nations. And that's why the United States is building momentum behind this goal. So let's turn to the United States. This is one of my favorite statistics. Did you know that half of the United States is actually underwater? The area of ocean jurisdiction is larger than our land area. And so the colored areas on this graph, on this map, show you the parts of the ocean that the US controls. The United States has long been a global leader in ocean conservation. For almost 50 years, America has proudly celebrated our ocean treasures with a system of national marine sanctuaries. Today, this system includes 14 sites across the nation and celebrates our natural, cultural, and historical heritage. More recently, the US has led the global effort for large-scale, fully protected areas with bipartisan support. President George W. Bush created 4 marine monuments in the Central and Western Pacific. President Obama expanded protections for 2 of these areas, the Pacific Remote Islands and Papahanaumoku, and then created the first ever marine monument in the continental United States, the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts. Last Friday, President Trump rolled back those protections. So despite the lack of leadership in the White House today, Congress is picking up the reins. Last fall, Senator Udall introduced the 30 by 30 resolution to save nature. And earlier this year, Representative Holland introduced the same resolution into the House of Representatives. Since that time, nearly 200 businesses and organizations have voiced their support, along with many other leaders and influencers across the country. A key principle of this resolution is that nature is for everyone. To save nature, we must work with local communities, tribes, and states to conserve natural places and resources in an equitable and inclusive manner. It's not too late. We can create a better future. Our economic prosperity, the health of our communities, and the ability to weather the effects of climate change all depend on the services that nature provides. Yes, the scale and scope of this challenge is substantial, and to protect at least 30% of the ocean, the country will need to act in all domains, in all geographies, and in the interests of all communities. But America has a remarkable track record for solving environmental problems. By advancing locally led conservation initiatives, building a more inclusive, equitable, and just approach to stewardship, and responding to an ambitious national call to action, the United States can fulfill its promise as a conservation nation and serve as an example for the world to follow. So for more information on the international efforts and the national efforts, you can visit these websites. The Campaign for Nature covers the international campaign, and America's Nature Campaign can provide information on what's happening here in the United States. And finally, California is really leading the way on making this 30 by 30 bold, ambitious conservation agenda happen at the state level. So with that, I just want to say thank you again to the host and my esteemed panelists for having us here today to talk about this important topic. I'm happy to answer questions or stay in touch with people and put my email address up in case anybody is interested. So thanks so much. Catherine, I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Amy. That was a really nice, pretty detailed yet concise overview of 30 by 30. We will be having a dialogue and some Q&A after, but I think we'd like to get through the presentations. And so we have next up talking with us this evening, Elizabeth Murdoch. And Elizabeth is the director of NRDC's, the National Resource Defense Council's Pacific Ocean Initiative, where she works to protect important marine areas and species, advance global shark conservation, end illegal fishing, and promote strong policies to conserve our oceans. Elizabeth has worked in domestic and international wildlife conservation for over 20 years on issues including ocean conservation, bird conservation, illegal wildlife trade, and building local community engagement in conservation. Elizabeth is based in NRDC's San Francisco office. Just give me a moment to bring up your presentation. Close that one. You should be good to go, Elizabeth. Are you seeing your slide in full screen mode?
I am, thank you. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you for that nice introduction. And it's really an honor to be here celebrating World Oceans Day with Assemblymember Kalra and with my colleagues, Amy and Marcella, all of whom have shown true vision and leadership in their efforts to secure the health of our ocean. AB 3030 comes at a critical time. As my colleagues have pointed out, we currently face two huge ecological crises that quite literally threaten life on Earth. That's massive biodiversity loss and global climate change. More than 1 million species are threatened with extinction, many within decades as a result of human impacts, and climate change is profoundly changing the ocean, and the pace of that change is increasing. AB 3030 is California's response to these twin crises, and I think it is not an overstatement to say that the planet really needs California's leadership in establishing this 30 by 30 goal right now.
I will advance.
No, it's okay. I was just,
There we go.
There we go. Fantastic. I couldn't figure out who had the control of the slides. But the message remains the same regardless of which slide we're looking at. So why is AB 3030 so important? First off, California is a biodiversity hotspot. The ocean waters off of California are among the most productive in the world. In this area, cold, nutrient-rich waters from the deep ocean well up to the surface, supporting everything from sardine and anchovies to open ocean pelagic fish, which in turn support California's thriving commercial fisheries, as well as the thousands of whales that migrate along our coasts each year. California's ocean waters also include a rich variety of habitats, from rocky intertidal habitats to eelgrass beds to lush kelp forests to open ocean waters. And these habitats support a rich diversity of species as well, including algae and shellfish, finfish, sharks, seabirds, and a large diversity of marine mammals that we see when we visit our shores. These also include many threatened and endangered marine species. So we have a lot at stake here in California and a lot to protect. California is also already feeling the impacts of climate change. We're already seeing these impacts off the coast of California. Marine species are moving towards the poles as ocean waters warm, and they're shifting their ranges faster, in fact, 10 times faster than animals on land are doing. This means that the fish populations that our communities rely upon here in California are shifting away from our shores, bringing changes to the ecology and the economics of our communities alike. California is also very vulnerable to the impacts of ocean acidification, which can cause shells of important species like oysters, clams, and mussels to corrode. And some of these impacts have already begun to affect California's shellfish. In recent years as well, marine heat waves have become more common, and these lead to things like harmful algal blooms, shifts in the distribution of marine species, and changes in the marine food web. And some of these changes have devastated our kelp forests, forced the state to close fisheries, and contributed to starvation in our seals and sea lions. A third reason that California needs to be thinking about protecting its ocean is that California's ocean is crucially important to our state. Healthy and thriving oceans are important to all Californians and to those who visit the state for ecological, economic, recreational, and spiritual purposes. Our ocean economy brings in roughly $45 billion each year. That's including industrial uses as well as recreation and tourism and other uses as well. So it is sobering to see these impacts playing out right here in our backyard, but the good news is we can take action. California has long been a leader in ocean protection. In 1999, California passed the Marine Life Protection Act, which directed the state to implement a system of ecologically connected marine protected areas to help protect the state's marine species, habitats, and ecosystems. In 2012, California completed a comprehensive science-driven process that relied heavily on engagement from fishermen, industry, Native American tribes, conservation organizations, and other members of the public. So now today, California's MPA network includes 124 MPAs that cover roughly 16% of state waters. And importantly, it is hailed as a global model for MPA design and implementation. California has also been a leader on climate change, and in particular on elevating the role of oceans in responding to the climate crisis. In 2018, at the time when the Trump administration backed the US out of the Paris Climate Agreement, California hosted a global climate action summit in San Francisco, which showcased the essential role subnational governments can play in combating climate change. And importantly, it also shone a spotlight on the critical role of oceans as a pillar in combating climate change. And then California's continued to elevate the importance of the ocean climate nexus on the global stage following that Global Climate Action Summit. Through things like serving as a founding member of the Pacific Rim Ocean Climate Action Partnership, which is a partnership of organizations and governments at multiple levels that are committed to leveraging ocean climate solutions. By continuing to shine the spotlight on the importance of oceans at the Global Climate Conference of Parties, and by developing within the state its own strong portfolio of ocean climate actions that range from everything from mitigation to climate change to adaptation. And these ocean climate actions can serve as an example to other national and subnational, regional, local governments that are seeking to protect the oceans and to use their power to combat climate change. So that is a very strong record, California, of leadership. And I just want to stress this. I think if we have any hope of meeting the 30 by 30 goal that Amy has talked about at the global and national level, and that 30 by 30 goal that scientists are saying is absolutely necessary to protect biodiversity and address climate change, then we're going to need leaders like California to step up and lead by example. Unfortunately for us, I think our state is well positioned to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was a great overview, especially getting into what's happening here in California. Just a reminder that this is also being broadcast live on Facebook. So if you have any questions, please be sure to put them into the various chat functions, and we will try and get to those when we get to the Q&A section section of this event this evening. So next we are going to hear from Marce Graudiņš. Marce is an environmental and climate justice advocate who began her career in commercial fishing and aquaculture. She founded Azul in 2011, and it is the only US organization devoted to elevating Latinx voices to protect our coasts and ocean. Azul's cultural relevant strategies paired with its engagement and communications techniques have resulted in influential grassroots community action and leadership in shaping California conservation policy. Marce is also an internationally recognized leader and collaborator with over a decade of experience working across mainstream conservation and alongside environmental justice communities. She brings strong ties within the Latinx community and deep cultural fluency to her work. In 2019, Marce was appointed a member of the governing board of the California Coastal Commission. And I have your PowerPoint ready to go.
And that's Conservancy. Hi there.
Want me to go back a slide or?
I have those 3 slides, so it's fine. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation, for organizing this, Save Our Shores and Catherine. It's really exciting to talk about this right now. At the same time, for us, it's really brought up and highlighted the importance of, I think, that of nature as we sit here in our rooms and we do a Zoom, maybe something that would have been in-person event. I think this has really driven the point that the access to nature and to the outdoors is not really an equitable distribution in the US. And for too long, to be entirely honest, the costs and impacts of natural resource extraction have fallen disproportionately on low-income communities and communities of color. And so this is why having a goal like 30 by 30 that could in some cases address this legacy, like yield a more equitable distribution, is very, very exciting. Part of what we've discovered with this, if some of us weren't paying attention, was that nature is not an amenity, it's a necessity. It's necessary for all of us for our well-being. And what we really like about 30 by 30 at all levels is that's a moonshot that we can all get on board with. Azul fundamentally works in California. That's where we started. That's where most of our work is. But because sometimes we are the only ones producing materials in Spanish on certain subjects, we get calls from all over Latin America. And we've sort of grown our footprint organically that way. And one of the things that we get the most calls about is 30 by 30. And we haven't actually put a lot of materials out there, but this is one of the things that we get a lot of calls of. So this is something that for us is very exciting because it's a global call to action that we can all work on locally. And so one of the calls that we get, it's folks that are trying to get into ocean conservation, that they saw something on TV, they find us, like, what can we do? Where do I start? How do I take action? And usually, you know, at the beginning is, now we're getting a little more detailed, especially because we're not in every jurisdiction, but like most of our calls to actions in our activism was in the US, but with 30 by 30, we've discovered this is something that people can do anywhere they are. And that's extremely exciting because people can look into, you know, advocating locally wherever their location is. And that's something that's been extremely exciting because, again, it's something that folks understand, that they understand the need to have protection of nature, in this case, both ocean and land. And that's why we're so excited about this. We actually organized an event at the COP 25 in Madrid, and we had, you know, and that's the next slide you can see there. We had you know, a celebration of blue leadership for the ocean. And from what we saw there, from you know, from folks from the California delegation to the Minister of the Environment, Panama, there was a consensus of 30 by 30 being the way to go. That was the call to action. That was something that everybody was on board of. And that's extremely exciting for us. Here in California, you know, it's exciting, and thankful to member Kalra for leading this charge. You know, it's on top of that being the conservation being front and center, we also have an element of access and equitable access, and that's exciting. And this is, again, how California leads the way and sets trends in elevating that and elevating the importance. And when we do that, and when we create more access for more people in an equitable way, then we create more advocates, right? Because people can't protect what they don't love what they don't know. And so as we expand this is, you know, a compound effect. We get more folks outside, more places to they're protected, that are, you know, folks want to experience. We get more advocates, and ideally we make that change. And so, you know, this is exciting on those levels. I think that we obviously know the record of California being a leader in using and highlighting the role of, you know, the power of oceans to combat climate change. And so I think this is important that we keep them front and center. I think this is an idea whose time has come, or is here. And I think that folks are going to sign up, and this is why we're so extremely excited about this. So, I don't know if you have any questions. That's the...
Yeah, and if you would like to reach Marce directly, here is her organization, Azul, and information email. I am going to stop sharing my screen, and we are now going to have a conversation. I realized in sort of the last minute hubbub of Assemblymember Kalra still being on the floor, and then my technical difficulties of my system crashing just as we were about to get started, that I never even told you who I am. I'm Catherine, you've heard my name, Catherine O'Day, and I'm the Executive Director at Save Our Shores. And we are a much beloved and 42-year-old ocean conservation organization based in Santa Cruz, California. Our mission is to protect marine ecosystems. We do that by stewarding clean shores, healthy habitats, and living waters. And so I'm really excited also to be here tonight. Save Our Shores hasn't been directly engaged in the 30 by 30 conversations and meetings and activities, but we are very much advocating for those measures, both at the federal level and also at our state level. So we're really pleased to be able to host this conversation tonight or this evening. And we are still hoping that the Assembly member will be able to join us and be able to give us the highlights of his proposed bill, AB 3030. And it will be very exciting, I think, for us to hear that. So we really hope he will be able to get on with us this evening. If not, I think the members of our panel here might be able to share some of that, some of the specifics of that bill, but we'll see and hope that the Assembly member joins us. If you have questions, you can put them into the chat. I see there are a few coming in already, which is kind of exciting. But I wanted to just start and going back to Amy's presentation. Elizabeth, can you come back? Oh, there you are. So going, to what Amy had to say, and that this is a UN initiative. That's right, Amy? Yeah. And I was just wondering how many countries are actively participating. Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the exact number, but all the countries that participate as part of that Convention on Biological Diversity are part of the conversation. Well over 100. I don't know the exact number, but it's a global conversation, and it's a joint global framework that they're developing together for those ambitions.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot, over 100 countries. It's exciting. Is there any, where would you say, where would you position the US in terms of leading or, following in the pack, being among the ones who are really pushing this agenda? And which other countries are really coming on strong for this?
So in terms of US leadership, I would say historically we have absolutely been a leader in ocean conservation. The United States was really one of the first countries to come out with these large scale, fully protected areas, those actions that President Bush had taken back in the early 2000s. And that really set a tone over the following decade for large scale protected areas by many nations around the world. So I definitely think that the US has been in a position of leadership, but that leadership has really fallen off in the last couple of years. So other nations have come in to fill that void and are leading some of these conversations at the international level.
Yeah, awesome. So that kind of led me to another question I was jotting down as you were speaking, because you brought up what previous administrations have done, and that their current administration has sort of taken the opposite tactic and has been rolling back. And this question is open to any of you, but in particular, have you seen any input? Have you gotten any input, or have you seen any attempt by this administration to either support or more likely oppose 3030?
Oh, so that's a good question. I mean, there really hasn't been any conversation on 30 by 30 at the administration and the White House level. I would say that, trying to find a little bit of silver lining, this administration has pushed forward some national marine sanctuary designations for the first time in almost 20 years. We have our first new national marine sanctuary, Malos Bay, which protects shipwrecks in Maryland, just south of Washington, D.C. on the Potomac River. And there are several other sanctuaries or sanctuary expansions that are in the queue for designation and expanding protection. So I think that's a very positive sign. We haven't seen that movement in a number of years. The other side of the coin is that in terms of highly or strongly protected areas, the administration has not been supported and has actively been working to roll back some of those landmark conservation advancements that we have in our country. And keep in mind, these are some of the largest rollbacks to ocean conservation in the US's history. So the action last Friday removes about 85% of the protected areas around the continental United States. So it's a different scale when you start talking in the Central and Western Pacific, but around the continental United States, that action kind of rolled back protections for about 85% of our ocean area, which is really just terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be a very good track record when we finally get through these 4 years, and hopefully it will not be 8. I also wanted to, sort of jump over to you, Marce, and the wonderful work that you're doing to bring more diverse voices to the conversation, writ broad in terms of ocean conservation and coastal conservation. And, also the fact that since this is a global initiative, can you speak at all to the way in which we are seeing diverse engagement around 30 by 30, whether it's locally here in California, across the country, or, in the work that you have been doing internationally and at the meetings and conventions you've attended?
Right. So here in California, we've seen, and when I say we've seen, this is the engagement that we get either by phone, email, social media, etc. Support here in California very much in the coastal sense. Haven't seen much of it outside of California and sort of like DC right now. But at the same time, obviously, there's other things kind of like taking up space in the evening news. But seeing a lot of it, and like I said, sometimes new folks in new countries that are sort of like getting calls from Cuba for the first time, getting calls from Ecuador, and folks that sort of like see this, especially in the framework of COP in Madrid. We had the event in Madrid, and that was covered extensively in Panama because we had the Minister of the Environment there, and that's something that sort of makes sense for people. Like let's create a savings account. Let's save some of this of nature for people. And it's really interesting because people say it as like that. They don't see it as exclusive or as putting it aside. It's just like we're saving part of the planet for us. Like there's that connection and that link of like, humans in nature. And so that's really exciting.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question in the chat here that's kind of related to that. So I'm going to toss it out to you. And first, the individual, Adrian Hampton, asks if, she says thank you for the presentations, and then asks if increasing access to nature for all is championed, yet is also met with hesitation in regard to gentrification, or she's stating that. So her question is, as we advocate for 30 by 30, should we be mindful of advocating for anti-displacement as well?
I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have. I would like to have more details about specifically what she's talking about, gentrification. I'm guessing, some specific, and we've noticed this again with the pandemic and everybody sheltering in place, how it does take resources and time and effort for folks to access nature, and how, obviously there are places that are pork poor that don't have, that facility. So if I'm assuming that's where that's coming from, I think this is why having a bill like AB 3030 that talks about, both protection of land and water and places access at that same level, it's a holistic conversation, and that has to be talked about in the whole context. I'm hoping that answers that.
And just to follow on to that, are we seeing much engagement with our indigenous peoples, especially, maybe you can speak to particularly our Native American communities?
I can't say that I can speak to that because we don't really have that subject matter expertise per se, but I can say that we're seeing increased support from all kinds of folks. And that's what I would like to say. Otherwise, I can't really, off the top of my mind right now, speak to that.
Yeah. Amy or Elizabeth, do you know how much engagement we're seeing from our Native American communities who have had a very long history of coastal protection until they were removed from their native lands? But curious, either of you know?
I should let Amy speak to the national scene, and perhaps you have more expertise there than I do, certainly. But I would say that I know that in California's history of marine protection, the state has really made an effort to engage the tribes as part of the, for example, the Marine Life Protection Act process. There was a lot of tribal consultation that that occurred, and Marce may be able to speak to this piece a little bit too. So certainly being able to take into account traditional ecological knowledge, traditional uses of the ocean has been a key piece of the MLPA process, and one that I think continues in as the state has moved forward with implementation of the MPA network. That engagement has continued, and the desire to hear from our California Native communities. And then the other thing I'll just point out too is actually, as we speak, there's a proposal that was brought forward by communities in Southern California, including the Chumash, and I think spearheaded by the Chumash, to designate a new national marine sanctuary, the Chumash National Marine Sanctuary. It's a lengthy process to achieve a national marine sanctuary, so the status it's in right now is actually simply a nomination, which sort of puts it in front of NOAA to consider through its public process, but that's another example of leadership, I think, for ocean protection in California.
And thank
I
you.
would say globally, there's definitely a movement of indigenous communities spearheading protected areas. Like I said, I can't speak specifically to this, but and I think it's important that we don't say it's starting or it's changing. I think that we as a conservation community are now recognizing it and taking notice.
Okay,
Excellent.
great.
I was just gonna,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna add, because I think in the context of the marine national monuments, if you think of Papahanaumoku, that monument proposal came from the Native Hawaiians. It was brought as a proposal for cultural reasons to protect that area, and part of the designation process enabled co-management with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs on equal footing with the federal government and the state government. So I think that's an excellent example of where the Native Hawaiians had brought this proposal forward and for protection. And I think, just like Marce mentioned, I think it's greater awareness for and engagement of Indigenous peoples in those conversations, and cultural practitioners recognizing, the information is coming from those communities. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and it's fantastic to see kind of broader awareness on the ocean community side for inviting those conversations.
Yeah, great. So I just saw in the chat that Assemblymember Kalra just got off the floor. So it looks like he should be able to squeeze in here and give us some highlights of 30 by 30, well, AB 3030. While we're still waiting for him, I wanted to go back to Elizabeth. And you talked about the MPAs already protect about 16% of the California coast. Does that mean that we've got 14% more to get to 30 by 30? Or, how do we figure the math there?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Catherine. It's a really excellent one. And I think California has taken, so far, the Assemblymember and the state have taken a very wise approach to this. I think the Assemblymember Kalra can speak to this when he joins us, but the way the bill is framed, it establishes a goal, the protection of 30% of California's land and waters, and it commits California to helping to advance a goal of protecting 30% of the nation's waters. And the reason for that is because, California is part of our coastal waters, only go from 0 to 3 miles out from the shore. But those coastal waters are part of the California Current large marine ecosystem, which actually runs all along the coast of California, far more than 3 miles out, and includes Oregon and Washington as well, and part of Papahanaumoku as well. And it's one of the most productive ocean ecosystems in the world. And so I think the thinking is that that state line is perhaps somewhat arbitrary. And when we think about protecting the ocean off the coast of California, we need to think more broadly. So I think the bill establishes that goal, and also allows for a lot of flexibility for the state to figure out exactly where and how to achieve those protections in a science-based way that includes consultation with stakeholders and community members, and importantly too, will be responsive to an upcoming review of our existing MPA network. So in 2022, at the 10-year mark, the state will conduct a management review of the MPA network, which will help us understand how's that MPA network been working, what are the impacts of having established those protections, and that can be used then to inform how the state moves forward in implementing AB 3030.
And I would like to say that a highlight, and one of the reasons the California MLPA process is so, it's a trendsetter worldwide, frankly, is because of the process of how these areas were designated. And this had, first a, extensive stakeholder process that included all kinds of folks that were invested, interested, and connected to the ocean, be it on the commercial side, on the industrial side, on education and conservation. So it's extremely important to understand that this is not just kind of run over that's something that California upholds as a leader because of the process itself as well. So I think that very important that we understand that that doesn't just come on top of that. That is a process that needs to be upheld, and people worked on very hard, and actually I was part of it in Southern California. And it's that investment and that buy-in from everybody that kind of makes it work. So that's not what it's doing.
Yeah, that's really great. And I just want to mention, immediately following this session or this event, we are going to have another session on MPAs. It's not really so much like the background and the process and understanding all of that. We're going to celebrate the MPAs with a slideshow taken by amateur photographers that we run every year, and award prizes for photographers who get incredible visuals of our local MPAs. So that's coming up right after this, and we'll be talking with Nicole Palma, who's manager for the California MPA Collaborative, as well as two of our photographers. So they'll be sharing why they love to go into the MPAs and take those pictures. While we're still waiting for Assemblymember Kalra, there were several questions in the chat about how can people advocate for this? What should they be doing? Are there petitions to sign? Are there Congress members they should be calling? What kind of actions can individuals take?
So I can start at the international level. I shared a website for the Campaign for Nature, just Google Campaign for Nature, and they have a global petition. And that petition and that website shares ways for individuals to sign or show support, for organizations to sign and show support, and ways for governments to show support. So that website provides some great tools for how you can engage and register your voice for those goals, those international goals. At the United States level, from an organizational standpoint, we've been collecting names on a letter demonstrating support for the two resolutions that are in Congress right now, the resolution by Senator Udall and Representative Holland. And a number of organizations have online petitions to voice their support. Catherine, one of those is the Healthy Oceans Coalition. So we could send around that link.
Absolutely. And so, perfect timing, Amy, just as Assemblymember Kalra joined us. And we are running kind of short on time, so I'm going to just introduce you, Assemblymember, as Assemblymember Kalra, who represents District, it's 27, is that right?
That's correct.
And I have worked with the Assemblymember in the past on some plastic pollution measures. He's got really good, strong background in environmental protection. And so we're so excited to have you with us this evening. I know it's been hectic for you. You know, what a tremendous action you took to introduce AB 3030. And if you could please give us the highlights
Sure.
before we have to wrap up this session. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for waiting for me. I just got off the floor of the Assembly. We had a long debate and finally just voted to place ACA 5 on the ballot in November, and that's to overturn Prop 209 and allow for affirmative action, both to take into account race as well as gender for public contracts, education, all that. So it was a very long debate of a couple hours, but we got it done. And so I'm here in the office, and I just want to thank all of you, Catherine, Save Our Shores. Just there's such a huge coalition, as you all know, that's behind 3030. And so it really is becoming a global movement. You know, I know that we have representatives like Marce from Azul and Elizabeth from RDC, two really critical co-sponsors of AB 3030. And so you may have been talking about a little bit, but what AB 3030 does and why it's such a timely bill is, you know, we need to do as much as we can to preserve our land and our waters. You all know that. And as does our co-sponsors. And I also want to mention Audubon California Defenders of Wildlife, of course, as well. But it's a really basic concept. It would declare as a goal for our state that 30% of our land areas and waterways and our water, including our shores, are preserved, and that we protect 30% of them by 2030. Now, this is a step, as many of you know, that leading scientists are saying is the bare minimum of what we need to do to safeguard our clean air, our drinking water, our food chains that support all life on Earth. By pursuing these ambitious but achievable conservation goals, we can prevent the majority of animals and plants from going extinct and cut biodiversity loss in half, which will increase the likelihood that we can preserve the integrity of existing ecosystems. And especially now, the need to protect nature is more critical than ever. As we've seen our health and economic systems, I think, challenged, to say the least, by COVID-19. This global pandemic is really teaching us what we need to do to preserve our lands. And this actual pandemic was likely spread from animal to humans as a result of habitat loss and overexploitation. The effect of the biodiversity crisis on people is more pronounced than ever, and we know that. Nature around the world is in a state of crisis. You know, it's threatening our planet and our humanity, and the pandemic has demonstrated that nature is not simply an amenity. It is essential to our well-being. In a time of social distancing, outdoor spaces, parks, and wildlife areas offer one of the few escapes for families that are stuck indoors. And I'm hoping that people can take advantage of them for many years to come, based on the experience we're all living through. Protecting more places, providing closer to home opportunities to get into nature, and improving community access to outdoor spaces has a wide range of health benefits in addition to the environmental benefits. The bill does create a set of goals and guidelines for our state to do its part in reversing the worldwide biodiversity and climate crises by committing to a set of guiding principles that reflect the needs and priorities of all people, honor the sovereignty of tribal nations, and build upon strong private and public land conservation traditions and sustainable management practices in our state. And, you know, building upon, well, I do want to make mention of this because oftentimes we don't, you know, we talk about land conservation in different corners of our state, but we want this to address historical inequities as well faced by communities of color and economically disadvantaged communities. By ensuring this bill also calls for improving access to nature for all people in our state, not just those remote areas in our state. Building on past leadership, a statutory commitment from California to protect a representative 30% of our lands and waters in the next decade will help ensure that wildlife can thrive so that all Californians can enjoy the benefits that nature provides, and that wild areas can continue to enhance the strength and well-being of our state and the planet. With AB 3030, we can also provide international leadership in the effort towards meeting this important conservation goal and setting an example for the rest of the country and the world. And so right now, California is poised to become the first state in the nation to adopt a 30 by 30 initiative. And as we know, whatever California does, the rest of the country hopefully and usually and hopefully follows. We were the first to pass legislation to maintain vital protections for our state's incredible diversity of migratory birds when the federal government reneged on its commitment on key wildlife protections. I want to thank Audubon California for that partnership. And we continue to be a leader in promoting sustainability through reducing plastic waste, banning single-use hotel toiletries, and keeping other plastics out of our oceans and coastlines. So to wrap it up with AB 3030, California will continue to lead by example by implementing policies and initiatives that we know will protect biodiversity and combat the climate crisis. And I know I spoke very quickly because we're short on time, but I just want to thank all of you so much. We're all a team in this. I'm one part of that team. My staff enjoys immensely working with all of you. And I believe, especially in this time, this shortened legislative, I had 27 bills when this year started. I cut it down to 9 because we had to cut down our bills. I'm so grateful that my colleagues and our leadership and their vision allowed us to continue the journey with AB 3030 because we can't stop, we can't slow down in our environmental goals, and California needs to lead. And again, I want to thank Save Our Shores and all of our partner organizations on AB 3030 and beyond in really setting the stage to allow California to continue to be a global leader. And so I'm just grateful. I'm grateful I was able to catch the tail end of the program because I was stuck on the floor for the last 7+ hours. And I look forward to catching up on some of the conversation that occurred over the past hour as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Assemblymember Kalra. We are just about at time. I do want to comment, though, that it was great, and congratulations to our leaders in Sacramento for getting the affirmative action measure continuing to move forward. That's great news, especially given everything that we're seeing. The incredible civil unrest, the fact that we all have to remember and repeat over and over and over again that Black Lives Matter, and that is all part of 30 by 30 also, that consideration is being built into it, is really great. The environmental community has a lot of work to still do to better integrate, and it was a pleasure to be able to have Marce with us, who is bringing the Latinx voice to the ocean community. And so I do want to just thank you all. I'm sorry to have to wrap this up. I think we could have another hour on this easily. And I'm sorry for the technical difficulty at the beginning when my system crashed, but our excellent panelists just kept on going like nothing happened. So again, thank you so much, Amy, Marce, Elizabeth, and of course, Assemblymember Kalra. We will be going right into our next session. For everyone who has joined this one and would like to stay on, please do. We're going to pause momentarily to take a break from the recording of this session so we can then start fresh with the next. But again, thank you so much. And everybody, Kate, for 30 by 30, it is important. Okay. Life-sustaining natural system